and we are starting it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. A very good afternoon to all of you. A very good afternoon to all the participants. And thanks for joining this webinar on leveraging benefits under recent free trade agreements. Let me just explain the very fact that this presentation is of very topical interest today because of the recent FTAs which have been recently signed by India. Let me explain the flow of this presentation. First, we would like to have a look at what FTAs are and then discuss the salient aspects of the two recent FTAs which India has signed. Then we will deep dive into the actual process as to how the FTA benefits can be obtained, as well as the compliances around the same. We will then highlight some of the important lessons of the previous FTAs, which we need to be mindful of. And finally, we would also cover some areas about which businesses should be concerned and discuss the way forward. So I once again thank the organizers for having invited us, and it's always a pleasure to be addressing such a vast gathering of people who are very keen to know about what FTAs are and how to go about leveraging the benefits of FTA. But before we start of talking about FTAs, I think we need to step back a bit and scan the dynamic landscape of world trade. Can you go to the previous slide? World trade has been impacted by natural disasters like COVID-19, as well as man-made disasters and crises like the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. The World Trade Organization expects merchandise trade to grow 3% this year, down from the previous forecast of 4.7% earlier. The interconnected nature of global trade has made it very vulnerable to shocks in any part of the world. The World Trade Organization, as well as the member countries, are seeking to mitigate these adverse impacts while ensuring greater resilience in the supply chain. Post-COVID, we are seeing a rise in the momentum of protectionism in some form or the other. Tariff increases are just a tip of the iceberg. Non-tariff measures are often more impactful, but relatively less noticed impediments in global trade. You'll be surprised to note that there are about 50,000 non-tariff measures which were initiated till date, and about 9,000 measures are still in force. The increasing trend of non-tariff measures is seen as restrictive and perhaps distortionary in the arena of global trade. Fortunately for India, India has achieved an unprecedented level of merchandise exports of about $419 billion and services exports of about $250 billion in last financial year. India has even got a higher target of about $800 billion for FY23. Given the current headwinds in global trade in the form of weaker demand in Europe and Asia, as well as the sanctions against Russia, there is a dire need for India to diversify its exports into more geographies. This is where the tremendous opportunities lie in leveraging the benefits of free trade agreements, which India has signed and which India is also negotiating in the future. As you will see in the webinar today, FTAs can give rise to a host of trade benefits for the trade and industry and in both the partner countries. This will be helpful in mitigating the effect of disruption in global supply chain and to enhance resilience in trade amidst geopolitical uncertainties. So let's now go deep and straight to the topic of FTAs. Let's see what FTAs are. FTAs are basically agreements between two or more countries to eliminate or reduce customs tariff as well as other non-tariff barriers. The World Trade Organization, the WTO in Geneva, holds the fragile fabric of international trade system together with a rules-based system of trade covered by GATT. The most favored nation principle is a fundamental principle of WTO. It mandates that every WTO member shall accord equal treatment of all countries and eschew discrimination in treatment. However, in terms of Article 24 of the GATT, the WTO countries can deviate from the MFN principle and form a free trade area. I would like to say that free trade agreements come in different names and different formats. It could be the CECA or the CEPA. The CECA is a Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Agreement, or the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, CEPA, or of course the latest ECTA, the Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement, which we have signed with Australia. As you are aware, in the last decade or so, over 15 FTAs were signed by India with countries like Japan, South Korea, ASEAN countries, and other neighboring countries. However, the recently signed FTAs and the FTAs and negotiation are unique in many ways. These are called the New Age FTAs, as they incorporate more aspects of the traditional FTAs, which mostly cover trade in goods and trade in services, and some aspects of investments. These New Age FTAs often include matters which are outside the ambit of FTA and outside the ambit of the free trade agreements, in the sense that they are not part of the WTO law. And these FTAs involve much deeper trade integration. So some of these are sustainable trade, labor standards, trade remedies, and digital trade. So let's now see what are the key benefits that can accrue to FTAs, due to FTAs. The first and foremost, to my mind, is predictability and stability of the customs tariff. As you are aware, there have been many increases in customs tariff in the recent past, which can practically destabilize the supply chain. What an FTA does is to freeze the import duty rates at the preferential rate for all time to come. There is no worry about potential hikes in the duty rates. The second benefit is, of course, the opportunity that lies in supply chain optimization. Different FTAs give us tremendous flexibility as far as choosing the optimal supply chain, which is the most suitable for the businesses in terms of costs, in terms of resilience. The third advantage, I would say, is the advantage which lies in the working capital efficiency, as there is a lower or a nil rate of import duty under the FTA. There is optimization of cash flows once the FTA benefits are obtained. And finally, I think one of the best advantages out of modern FTAs is that it gives protection to businesses, protection in terms of IP protection, protection in terms of data protection, and safeguards from any surge in imports under the FTA. So I think this is very, very important to understand that new age FTAs are something which India has to contend, Indian businesses will have to contend, and this is what India is going to sign in the future. So there is a distinct sea change in what the way in which India has been signing FTAs in the past, and the way India will be signing in the future. So going next to the next slide, we would like to have the Indian perspective, which is changing as far as FTAs are concerned. FTAs have always been part of the strategic arrangement which India has to boost its trade and investment. Earlier, the FTAs have resulted in far greater exports rather than imports from the partner countries. And because of this, India's trade deficit has been affected. Some of the main reasons for the skewed position are that India has kept very few sensitive items under the exclusion category. And the Indian IMFN rate was much higher than those of the FTA partner countries. The average rate which was prevailing in India on the customs import duty was much higher. So when there was a FTA benefit given to the other country, the exporters from those countries had a distinct advantage, and they were able to export it to India at a much lower rate. And the third thing is that there was far lesser consultation and participation from businesses during the earlier FTA regimes. So I think this is where it's very important to understand that unless and until the trade and industry participates in these discussions, they give forward their views, they tell what hurts them and what will help them in the negotiation process, the government will not be able to take it forward to the other country. India has now recalibrated its FTA strategy in practically two important ways. First, India has sought to review the existing FTAs to mitigate the effect of the lacuna in the FTA provisions which were there earlier. We discussed about this just a while back. Secondly, India is now leveraging its huge market economy, its tech capability, and the better negotiating skills to get a fairer, better, and a more reciprocal trade deal during its current and future FTAs. The way the UAE FTA and the Australian FTA have been framed clearly shows India's new strategy is working to the benefit of its businesses, especially the exporters. Moving on to the India-UAE CPA, which is the India-UAE UAE FTA. As I told you, CEPA stands for the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, which is a landmark of sorts for India. The unique thing about this FTA is that the entire text of this FTA was about 881 pages, and this was negotiated and signed in a record time of 88 days. India, in fact, finds that there is a lot of complementarities as far as UAE is concerned, and this FTA has been very important for India and as well as for UAE. UAE is in fact India's third largest partner in trade, and the UAE also the second largest export destination for India. And in fact, the very fact that the UAE has offered in this FTA as much as 97% of its tariff lines for duty elimination makes this FTA one of the most attractive ones for India, for Indian exporters especially. The stringent rules of origin which are framed under this FTA are pretty high. They have fixed a minimum value addition of about 40% as against about 30-35% of the earlier FTAs. Why this has been done, you may ask. This is because typically UAE is not a manufacturing hub as much as India is, and there are possibilities that there could be a misuse of the FTA provisions by rerouting some of the products of other countries and passing it off as a produce of FTA. So the rules of origin have been made very strict, and the minimum value addition has been made about 40%, which means that only goods which cross this threshold, either in India or in UAE, will be able to be considered for this benefit. Another very important thing is that for the first time ever, India has signed an agreement incorporating digital trade, which provides that India and UAE shall endeavor to maintain a legal framework governing electronic transactions, which are consistent with the United Nations model law and electronic commerce. Both the countries have also agreed that there shall be no unnecessary burden on digital trade, which includes that India and UAE shall not adopt any measure regarding authentication that would prohibit an electronic transaction and shall not deny digital signature validity except under circumstances provided for under its law. So this has clearly recognized that digital trade is the future, and both countries have signed up to a partnership to enhance digital trade between both the countries. Other important aspects are of course regarding government procurement and also a provision for a permanent safeguard mechanism, which are critical for this FTA. One unique feature of this FTA is that most of the items such as auto and auto components, which are there in the PLI scheme, the production linked incentive scheme, has been kept away from the tariff elimination to ensure success under the Make in India scheme. So key sectors which are actually impacted under this FTA are of course listed on the right hand side of the slide, and you can see that pharma and gems and jewelry are some of the most impacted sectors. In fact, the expectation is that pharma and gems and jewelry are supposed to be among the most benefited sectors in this under this FTA. And of course, other labor-intensive sectors such as textiles, leather and footwear and engineering products are also fairly high as far as the advantages are concerned. Pharma exporters from India had to wait for several months to get authorization from the United Arab Emirates authorities. This has now been resolved by ensuring that product registration will be fast-tracked in 90 days by the UAE if the exporter already has obtained such product approvals from other developed countries such as the US, the UK or Japan or the EU. So I think it's very important that pharma industry, if they already have such product approvals from other countries, they can use it to their advantage and get a flat 90-day approval in a fast-track method for product authorizations. This FTA is also supposed to is expected to boost bilateral trade between both countries to about $100 billion from the present $30 billion in just 5 years. And it's also expected to generate about 1 million jobs in the labor-intensive sectors which are part of the FTA. Moving on to the India-Australia FTA, I would like to move on to the next slide. We would like to know more about the India-Australia Free Trade Agreement. This is known as the ECTA, unlike the other one which was a CEPA This is known as ECTA. ECTA stands for Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement. So this agreement is in two phases. The first phase has been signed now. It is yet to be implemented. And the second phase of this ECTA will be negotiated and signed much later towards the later half of this year. The ECTA is actually unique in the sense that it covers all the traditional tracks under the FTA, such as trade in goods and trade in services. It is a precursor to a much larger trade agreement with Australia and other modern tracks, such as digital trade, sustainability, data protection, and other things. So though this ECTA has been signed, it is expected to come into effect in the next few months, and the date is yet to be announced. This FTA has given substantial benefits to the Indian exporters. As much as 96.4% of Indian export value gets duty-free access into Australia once the FTA becomes effective. The rules of origin have been made quite stringent once the FTA becomes effective. Safeguard mechanisms have also been built into the FTA to prevent sudden surge of imports. And in fact, a separate pharma annex has been given in this FTA. It has been incorporated to give fast-track approvals, as I told, for pharma products. Under this particular FTA, there is also a special provision to give a benefit under the Double Taxation Avoidance Agreement, DTAA. Australia was actually charging tax under the head royalty from Indian IT companies for offshore work done in India, although the same income was taxed in India as well. So there was an element of double taxation. So this led to almost losses of about $1 billion for the last 10 years. But it is good to see that under this FTA, this issue has been resolved now, and this has been actually one of the biggest aspects of this FTA, that this double taxation has actually come to an end as part of this ECTA. So as I was telling, phase 1 of this ECTA has been signed, and phase 2 will be signed by the end of the year. With Australia going to the polls in hardly a couple of days, the outcome could impact the future negotiations under the ECTA. But I'm hopeful that whatever we have gained so far will be sustained, and given India's current geopolitical advantage which it has, I think India can leverage much better benefits under this FTA going forward. So having seen the major aspects of these two FTAs, it is critical to understand the process, to understand the compliance mechanism about FTAs. The process will actually be explained by my colleague, Gautam Khattar. I would like to hand it over to him to take it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ramesh, and good afternoon, good evening to everyone. I hope I'm audible to all, since I was seeing some messages in the chat. Yeah,
yes,
thank you. Thank you. Okay, so with that background on FTAs, I will get into the process to claim the benefits under the FTAs, both from the importer perspective and exporter perspective. Now, the first slide is more from an importer perspective. And here, as you see, what we are wanting to put across is that the process to claim benefits is basically in 4 steps. The first and foremost is that the importers should look at the supply chain, look at the country, exporting country from where the goods are coming in, and does India have an FTA with the exporting country or the trading partner. If the answer to that is yes, then the next question is to look at the free trade agreement, look at the classification of the imported product and whether this classification is forming part of the tariff notification issued by the Ministry of Finance under the relevant free trade agreement. Here, the classification plays a very important role, and when we come to the subsequent slides, we will talk about the relevance of the classification. But the point here is that as a process number 2, you need to look at the classification, whether that classification is forming part of the schedule and the tariff notification. If again the answer is yes to this, then the third step is to consider whether the imported products meet the origin criteria under the free trade agreement. And If that is also yes, then you move to the compliance and the documentation required under the domestic regulations of India, which is the Kharotar, which is also governing the free trade agreement compliances. To give you some more background about Kharotar, it is important to note that this India's new rule, which India introduced basically to trace the country of origin, was taken before the trade policy review at the WTO, when India's free trade partners like Japan, South Korea, and Indonesia raised question over this new rule, which came in September of 2020. Uh, the trade partners raised concerns as to the increased cost of applying free preferential rate, which will come by adopting these rules. Also, they said and that these rules would basically be an obstacle to use the trade agreements or could be barrier to import. And finally, the allegations was that there would be a challenge around data confidentiality. However, after the amendment in the Customs Act, the Ministry of Finance issued the notification for Kharotar rules, wherein it shifts the onus on the importer to verify the country of origin beyond receiving the usual certificate of origin to claim the tariff benefits under an FTA. And it also puts onus on the importer to possess sufficient origin related information. So basically, now the onus is shifting on the importers in India to ensure that the certificate of origin is authentic and they have all information as backup, which goes into the certificate of origin at the side of the exporter. Now, before this new regulation came into force, the verification of the origin, in case there was any doubt, was made through nodal agencies in the respective countries. However, with these new regulations which have been provided, the Indian Customs Officer can now ask for further information directly from the importer first, and which means that we are shifting the needle from G to G from to B to G model now. The government's rationale behind the new rule is to restrict the misuse of FTA by fraudulent traders to misdeclare the country of origin to avail duty concessions. As we've heard, India has been a donor country in case of import of goods under FTA, where imports have been much more than the exports. And therefore, the Indian government wants to ensure that sufficient information is available with the Indian importers while claiming the benefits under the FTA. Therefore, what is of importance in these four steps is compliance with the domestic regulation, which is the Kharotar. And on the right-hand side of this slide, you will see the documentation requirement, which is not only the certificate of origin, which is mandated across all FTAs, which establishes that the goods are of a particular origin with which India is a trade partner. Beyond that, there is a requirement of Form I, which is forming part of the Kharotar, which the importer needs to fill and file before the Indian Customs Authority for each shipment, for each bill of entry. So this is the broad framework for import of goods and for claiming any benefits under a free trade agreements which the importers need to comply with. Moving to the next slide, which is more from an exporter perspective, which is an Indian exporter exporting to a country with which India has an FTA. Here, under a typical trade agreement, duty concessions are required to be extended only to such goods which are made in the exporting country, which is in our case made in India. Each FTA contains a set of rules of origin which prescribe the criteria that must be fulfilled by the goods to obtain or attain the originality certificate in the exporting country. Therefore, the goods under the trade agreements are required to be covered under the certificate of origin, which is issued by the designated authority of the exporting country. The certificate of origin contains details of goods exported and the originating criteria fulfillments. Now, there are different types of originating criterias. There could be value add, which as we just looked at, it could go as high as 45%. There is also a requirement of change in customs tariff heading, which could be at 4-digit or 6-digit. And like the new age FTAs, they could also be product specific rules of origin. So these rules of origin need to be fulfilled prior to issuance of any certificate of origin. The basic steps for getting the certificate of origin are the 6 steps which are mentioned here. To take you through these 6 steps, the first and foremost is that the exporter needs to apply to the designated authority for the certificate of origin. Now, in India, the designated authority is DGFT. There is also the Indian Chambers of Commerce and Federation of Indian Export Council. Amongst this, there are other under different FTAs. Also, there are various authorities which have been notified. So there is an application which needs to be made, and mostly this application is made electronically to the designated authority. The application needs to be backed up with all relevant documents to demonstrate that the origin criteria claimed by the importer are duly met. After due review by the designated authority, the certificate of origin is issued in the form and manner which is prescribed under the trade agreements. Thereafter, the exporter would send this certificate of origin to the importer in the importing country along with the goods. Some free trade agreements also allow use of electronic COO to transmit this. Once the importer receives the goods with the certificate of origin, that certificate of origin is required to be produced to the customs during the clearance process at the country where the goods have arrived. The critical part out here is, in case in the importing country, the customs challenge the certificate of origin on account of its authenticity or any information which is forming part of the certificate of origin, they would, as a process, reach out through the nodal authorities to the designated authority in India, which could be DGFT or the Indian Chambers of Commerce who have issued the certificate, to verify the content. That is the typical process which is followed. And this is one distinguished factor, that while for exports, typically the overseas customs would reach out to the nominated agency in India in case of doubt. Whereas in India, we have now introduced Carotar, which allows the Indian customs to first go and ask questions from the importer directly, and thereafter putting more onus on the importer to have information as to the originating criteria. And then if that is not satisfied, the Indian Customs Authority can then reach to the overseas designated authority. So this is one differentiating fact in terms of the process which we follow for import vis-a-vis the export process which is there. Moving ahead, so these are the broad 2 processes which we've just explained for import and export. Here in this slide, just want to emphasize some of the requirements for obtaining the certificate of origin for exporters. While a lot of these would be readily available with the exporters, which is the description of goods, which is the classification at the 6-digit level, I would like to draw your attention to point number 4, 8, 4, 7, and 9 rather. If you look at point number 4, serial number 4, it says description of components, materials, raw materials, etc., along with the respective country of origin. So when you go in to obtain a certificate of origin, not only your finished product details are required, but you need to also provide the details of all raw materials which are used in manufacture of the finished product. That is, the bill of material is required to be put across, which is used for manufacturing of the finished goods. So that is one additional level of information which is required. Not only this, if you look at serial number 7, from a business perspective, there is also information regarding labor cost and other overhead cost and profits which are required by the agencies, so that they can determine the appropriate value addition which is being undertaken. And for value addition, serial number 9, which is mentioned here, becomes relevant, that you need to demonstrate the value addition as a percentage of FOB or X works price, depending on the formula which is provided under the free trade agreements. There could be audits by the authority that they will come and validate some of this information or most of this information which you have provided. So it may need not be a self-assessment that you have provided this information and it is actually accepted. The authorities would also at times conduct an audit to validate all this information which you provide for obtaining the certificate of origin. Yes. With that background, what is relevant for us to consider and look at is some of the case studies and the lessons which we have from these case studies. If you look at overall, it seems India's quality of trade has not improved under the free trade agreements. What I mean by this is that India's tariff has declined. If you look at Japan FTA, the average tariff from 11.4, what data says, has come down to 7.5. And for South Korea FTA, from again 11.1, it has come to close to 8%. What has this done is, this has impacted the domestic industry, which is the point which is being made in these two case studies. Case study 1 is on India-ASEAN FTA, where the impact has been to the domestic paper industry, where you would see that there has been, since the FTA came in, over a period of 9 to 10 years, from 29,000 tons of import has increased to close to 343,000 tons. So that has been the volume of increase in imports, and therefore it has seen the ASEAN countries have used this opportunity to push their inventory into India, which has impacted the domestic paper mills, where we have seen there has been job losses in the past and factories have closed. Case study 2 again is similar, which has impacted the steel industry, primarily because there has been a push from Japan and South Korea of their surplus capacities and high exports to production ratios. There also, if you look at from a 5 lakh, which has gone to close to 75 lakhs, is what the increase has been on imports. Sorry, from 50 lakhs to 75 lakhs, the increase has been on imports. So both these case study clearly show that how an FTA, while we look at FTAs more from duty perspective, but these case study indicate that it could have a much larger impact, which is a business impact, which is a survival issue for a lot of domestic industry. Some of the lessons, just staying on the previous slide, please. Some of the lessons which we have, and primarily 3-4 lessons which I would want to bring across over here. What is common in these two case studies is that the duty from 10% went down to 0% over a period of 5 years. Now, the first lesson clearly is that industry should proactively engage with the policymakers during FTA negotiations to ensure that there is optimal outcome for the industry. These two case studies show that the industry may not have reacted or prepared themselves to get into a dialogue with the government. There was a 5-year window, and it seems that the industry may not have interacted over that period or even before the FTA with the government to put across the potential challenge which they may face once the duty is reduced to 0%. So that's the first lesson which is regarding proactive engagement with policymakers. The second is adequate planning by way of specializing or reorientation of business, which was not there. The industry may not have chosen to be competitive as FTAs are cast in stone. So that's something again which industry should look at while India continues to sign various FTAs, that there is a requirement to be competitive. They may need to reorient the business or look at specialization. The third aspect is that the industry should critically analyze the upcoming FTAs to enhance their competitiveness. Today, government is fairly open to the dialogue. Even the recent FTAs, which are under discussion, there is feedback which is sought from various industries. So there should be equal participation by the domestic industries, and their point of view should be provided. So these are the three broad takeaways from these two case studies. Moving to the subsequent case studies which are there. Here, moving away from a business perspective, if you look at these two case studies, they are more from the purpose of ensuring right documentation. How important is the right documentation under an FTA? Case study number 3 primarily refers to incorrect declaration, not only as to the classification of imported goods, but also on other parameters like profitability, which determine the origin criteria. Now, here in this case study, the benefit which was available under the FTA was to parts of the finished product. However, what was being imported was the finished goods in CKD form or SKD form, semi-knockdown condition. The customs authority investigated the matter and they concluded that the imports were not parts of the finished goods, but were actually finished goods themselves in SKD form. And therefore, there was the differential duty which was asked by the importer along with interest and penalties. Not only that, during the course of investigation, what also came out that the profitability and value-added numbers which were forming part of the certificate of origin were not genuine. And therefore, what happened was that it also got into a bad press situation for the organization. So that's case study number 3. Case study 4 is more from a supply chain and invoicing perspective, wherein typically when we look at free trade agreements, we always believe that goods are coming. In this case study, we have taken Malaysia, goods coming in from Malaysia to India, and India having a free trade agreement. However, the invoice for those goods which are coming directly from Malaysia is through Singapore. So yes, the new age free trade agreements and even some of the historic agreements provide for a concept which is called third party invoicing, which gives us an opportunity that while goods may be coming directly from a country with which India has a free trade agreement, however, the invoice for that good is raised from a country which is not part of the free trade agreement, still the benefit can be claimed. And this also becomes important for industry to therefore not only look at their supply chain, but also look at their invoicing methodology, that till such time the goods which are coming from the country with which India has a free trade agreement are covered under an FTA, the invoicing may still happen from a third country and the free trade benefits can be claimed. So this also is something which is supportive of looking at the supply chain. Overall, on this slide, to sort of summarize, probably two lessons which I would want to mention here. Documentation requirement should be given paramount importance by everyone, as there can be a reputational risk and not only a duty loss. And therefore, it is important that we align with the rules of origin to optimize any export opportunities and import opportunities. Further, importers, because of the case study 3, as we put it, importers should collaborate more with the suppliers to ensure that the certificate of origin is adequately completed. This is also relevant in view of the Carotar provisions, which are putting more onus on the Indian importer to have details which actually go in and form part of the certificate of origin. Now, you could also look at contracts wherein you could put in language and clauses to safeguard your interest and put equal onus on the exporter to provide documentation to support the contents of the certificate of origin. So those could be some of the commercial terms which companies can look at. But the main point is that the importers would need to collaborate more with the exporters that so that to ensure that there is due documentation. So we spoke about the importers, again, lessons learned in these two case studies and even in the previous case studies. But I believe there is also enough from a government perspective which can be thought through. The learnings are in some of these that the FTAs should have inbuilt trade remedies to cater to potential surge in import. And I believe that is happening in the current new age agreements, but this is something which the government should consider as we go along. Also, government can look at qualitative restrictions or quantitative restrictions rather in the FTAs to provide or stop the surge of imports. Also, there could be periodic reviews of FTAs as we go along. And fourth, that there could be a higher value add for select items which India can look at. And again, this aspect has been duly considered in some of the recent FTAs like the India-UAE. So these are some of the perspective and the points which can also be looked at from a government side in all these new age free trade agreements. Moving ahead to broad summarizing from all these case studies, and I think some of this we already spoke, the first three. The concern areas therefore land up is that we need to ensure correct classification. We looked at the case study of parts, benefits provided to parts, but goods coming in SKD or CKD form. So therefore, companies should really do their due diligence on the correct classification of goods and whether that HSN code is forming part of the free trade agreement. Second is the certification of origin, certificate of origin. A lot has been said about it in past disputes. Again, we looked at some case studies where the certificate of origin was challenged, contested that it was fraudulently obtained, and therefore India has now introduced Carotar to prevent those activities from happening. So certificate of origin is the foremost document, and it should not be treated as a mere compliance which will go in. The third is the details which go into the certificate of origin, which is the profit and costing. And therefore, if these are wrong in any fashion, there could be a larger reputational risk or penalty consequences which could happen on the importer side. If you look at some of the other concerns which are at the bottom of the slide from 4 to 6, we spoke about certificate of origin classification, but equally important is to retain these documentation because there would be audits where, if not at the time of imports, during audits, these documentation would be reviewed by the authorities. So a typical period of limitation on an extended period of limitation of 5 years. So documentation should be retained for at least that time period. Also, what is important is that the declaration in the import documents should match with the bill of entry, which is very important. Finally, the sixth point is following the prescribed norms for consignments, which we look at in my example, which I earlier gave for a case study, that goods are coming in from Malaysia, but invoicing is happening from third country. Now, you could also have a case that goods coming from Malaysia, but let's say diverted for whatever reason to Singapore and then come into India. Now, in such cases, you need to take care that once they are diverted to a country which is not an FTA, the goods should not clear the customs frontier for that country. So therefore, what the FTAs look at is that there should always be a direct shipment from the exporting country to India, with which India has a free trade agreement, if the goods are diverted to any other country which is not a member of that FTA, that the goods should not move outside or in the domestic territory or move out of the custom frontier in that country. So this also becomes relevant for businesses to keep in mind. With these concerns, I would move to my final slide and maybe request Mr. Ramesh to come in at this stage and then talk about what the way forward should be and how businesses should prepare for the free trade agreements.
Thank you, Gautam. It's been a very clear exposition of the entire compliance mechanism just surrounding FTA. And I think as far as way forward is concerned, it's very, very critical that companies understand that FTAs are there to stay in the future, and one needs to really prepare for it. First, of course, before signing an FTA, it's very critical that one needs to check the existing supply chain or the market access to identify issues for advocacy. By this, I mean that when an FTA is likely to be signed, then there are a lot of negotiations which take place between both countries. And it is critical to understand that if there is a specific product which you are exporting to a country X, and the negotiations going on, if there is a tariff in that country, as import tariff in that country, then perhaps you should send a representation to the Commerce Ministry seeking to ensure that it is free of import duty in that country. So I think ultimately we are aware that FTAs are actually very, very two-way process. It's a two-way street. There is a give and take. Both countries negotiate mutually, and it all depends on how many things are there on the table and which item is taken up for negotiation and which benefits are given to from each country's side. So from our side as a business part of the trade and industry, I think it's very critical to identify the existing supply chain you already have and the market access you have, to identify any specific products you have which are not getting the zero duty benefit in a particular country, the negotiations going on. The second thing I think is very important to analyze the entire impact of the FTA over several years. As I told you, that once the FTA is cast in stone, then it's very difficult to undo it. So if a particular exemption notification which you expected has not come under the FTA notification, once negotiations over, very little can be done to undo it. So I think it's very important to proactively help the government in negotiation by analyzing the impact on the businesses over the next few years. In the example which was given as far as the steel industry is concerned, as far as the paper industry is concerned, it was very, very clear that had the industries actually taken up the steps to help the negotiating team to have a very staged process of zero duty benefits for the imported goods in India, assuming that instead of 5 years, the staging process was about 10 years, 15 years. The duty rate would have reduced from 10% to 0% over 15 years. Then this negotiation would have happened in such a way that this benefit of 15 years of time taken would have been utilized by the domestic industry to make itself more competitive and to brace up for the imported goods which would be arriving into India at 0%. So I think it's very important to analyze the impact of the FTAs over the next few years. And as I have repeatedly told, it's very critical that active participation of business industries is critical for the negotiation process. The negotiation process itself takes a period of several months, or sometimes it takes years also. But during this process, industry must be proactive through the trade associations. It's very important to have frequent consultations with the Commerce Ministry and put forth your views. Finally, I think before the FTA comes, and once you have an inkling of what the likelihood of the FTAs to be, what items are going to get the preferential rate, I think it's important to realign your supply chain and other business strategies. I think this is very critical to anticipate what is going to happen in the future and to realign your existing supply chain and to ensure that you are aligned for the future FTA. So this is very critical, because if there are opportunities which you can exploit as far as tariff advantages are concerned, as far as non-tariff measures which will be relaxed. If you want to take advantage of those, you actually have to realign your entire supply chain well in advance, so that the moment the FTA kicks in, you are well prepared to take advantage of these measures. Finally, I think post the signing of the FTA, it's very, very critical to understand several important things. I think first, of course, understanding the eligibility and the compliance related requirements to claim the benefit. I think Gautam has labored hard to explain the entire compliance mechanism of the FTA. So unless and until one goes through the final aspects of the FTA, it's very difficult to obtain the actual benefit of the FTA. If the compliance is not done in the way the FTA requires you to do, I think the entire benefits will be taken back or clawed back from you at a later point of time. So which will be a serious cost to you. Another very important thing is to lay down a specific process or a standard operating procedure or do's or don'ts for claiming the benefits under the FTA. Every FTA is unique in its own way. It has its own rules of origin, it has its own product specific rules and its own procedures. So each FTA is specific. You have to lay down a standard operating procedure for your supply chain team to make sure that the benefits under the FTA are maximized by ensuring that there is a specific process by which all these things are followed. Finally, it's very important to collate all the requisite information which is required under the FTA. So I think it's very, very critical that documentation is very, very critical. Documentation, I would stress, because for 5 years, these documents are to be retained by the importer. The department, customs department can at any point of time in the next 5 years after the import, ask for certain documents under which this FTA was claimed. So I think a very rigorous documentation, preferably using technology, is critical to ensure that the benefits which are claimed are actually retained, because in the post-audit system which is there in the customs department, the audit could come and challenge these benefits, and it is very important to show the documentation which you already have. Finally, I think the technology framework to analyze and prepare for the trade benefits under the FTA is very critical. You have to analyze the certificate of origin and the requirements and the respective Form 1, which is prescribed under CARTA rules, which Gautam alluded to. That is very, very important. All these things are very critical for FTA, and I'm sure that using technology, which is very critical for this, it will help you preserve these documentation for a period of 5 years. Finally, I think licensing with the foreign suppliers, the overseas customers, is very critical, because you are dependent on them to get the information under Form 1, which is important for CARTA. So I think benefits which will accrue in the FTA, you will have to get things like the value addition norms, which you are not aware. If some item is there which will sort of be imported from, say, Japan or from UAE, I think the value addition norms which it has undergone in that country, you need to be very clear, and you need to get a documentation around that. So I think unless you have a proper license with your customer abroad, this documentation will be very difficult. So it's critical to have all these documents from the customers well in advance and preserve it for the customers in case they ask for it whenever necessary. So I think prior to the signing of the FTA, as well as post the signing of FTA, there are a lot of several aspects and several actions to be taken by the trade industry in a proactive manner. And unless and until the trade industry actually participates in the negotiations, it's really impossible for the government also to take up the point of view. So as the case studies have shown, it's very critical that trade and industry actively cooperates with both countries. It's also important that you anticipate the future FTAs. The future FTAs which are going to come are those which India is likely to sign with the EU, with Canada, with Israel, and with other countries. And I think you need to see a supply chain as far as these countries are concerned, and see where exactly it could be impacted. And you need to make a representation before the government to ensure that whatever benefits you can get out of a FTA, which is likely to happen, I think you should definitely press for it and request the government to negotiate and get the benefit for the Indian trade and industry. So I think we have come to the conclusion of this particular webinar. But before that, I think a few questions have been asked in the chat box. I would like to start with a few questions. The first question, of course, is about the product like a semiconductor. I would like Gautam to take up this question. Gautam, the question is that The question is that the semiconductor items like semiconductors are manufactured across different countries. The supply chain spans across several countries, and different countries have different processes. So the question asked is that if hundreds of countries are involved, how do I capture the end product as far as the entire value addition is concerned? So how do I handle this origin requirement? How do I actually get into this certificate of origin to prove my bona fides as far as the product is concerned? I think this is a very valid question. It happens all the time. And I think that this question has to be addressed specifically for each FTA. Each FTA has its own value addition norms and its own product specific rules. So I think Gautam can throw some light on this.
So yes, each FTA has its own value addition norms, and therefore what you need to factor is the last country from where the goods are coming into India. Number one, whether that last country from which goods come into India is under an FTA agreement with India. That would be of paramount importance. If yes, the way the value addition rules are defined are twofold. There is a direct and an indirect method. Now, typically in a direct method, they will look at what are the raw materials which have gone in for manufacturing of that product. And there would be an indirect method where they will also give you certain concessions for goods which the last country has imported from non-FTA countries. So there are direct and indirect methods which take into account this part of that while the finished activity is done in country A from which the goods are coming in, but there are various sub processes done in multiple countries. Now, those multiple countries, are they forming part of an FTA like an ASEAN FTA in which you're importing, or is it if it's a bilateral agreement, then they will not be. So depending on the FTA, you would choose between the direct or indirect method for determining the value addition.
Gautam, I'd like to also add a little bit to this. I'd like to say that the value addition norms are only for the non-originating material. If it is originating material, there's no issue. But as far as non-originating material is concerned, the value addition norms have to be strictly followed. And I think that it's very critical to understand that the 40% norms which we are talking about, the minimum value addition, as far as the India-UAE is concerned, CEPA is concerned, I think those are regarding the non-originating material. And whatever is originating between both the countries, because of the fact that there is a provision for accumulation in the free trade agreement, I think it's very, very critical to understand that the entire originating materials have no issue. The non-originating materials are what has to be seen as far as such items are concerned. And this is how we need to see the entire BOM, the bill of materials, as far as the product is concerned, which is coming to India, and understand the value addition norms. Thank you.
So I'll just take up some two quick questions in the interest of time which have come in. One is, how stringent is the origin criteria in the recent FTAs? The point out there is that there is, yes, a higher value addition requirement which has been put across to avoid any misuse of FTA. So yes, to that extent, there is stringency. Not only, so documentation remains the same, that there is a certificate of origin which is required. And from India perspective, there are Karotar provisions, but the stringency is in terms of higher value addition. So that's one. I think the other question is, how can the benefit be obtained in case of build to ship to countries are different? We spoke about this in the case study of third party invoicing. If the goods are shipped from the country with which India has a free trade agreement, that country can say, and let's say in our example was Malaysia, with which India has an FTA, Malaysia entity will say, bill to Singapore and ship the goods to India, and the goods will directly move from Malaysia to India.
In the imports under the FTA. Now, the question asked is that how exports have been facilitated by the FTA. I think that's a totally different thing. That's precisely the point we are laboring. We are saying that exports have not actually happened in the past FTAs. And most of the time, the imports have actually far exceeded the quantity of exports. So I think the case study is more to do with the increase in the imports rather than increase in exports. But I think this is a correction which is being carried out by the government of India as far as the FTAs are concerned. The government of India is now negotiating on better terms with its negotiating skills and trying to make sure that exporters are benefited. For instance, if you take the India-UAE exports, CEPA, the exports of gold jewelry is going to happen is something which is fantastic. The exports which are going to happen as far as gold jewelry is concerned is going to expand in a tremendous way, because the government has given substantial benefits as far as exports are concerned in UAE. There is zero duty benefit for gold jewelry as far as India is concerned. It was 5% earlier. So we have a state-of-the-art tariff advantage. The other advantages which India has negotiated in this deal is that India is also giving a specific 1% reduction in the import of gold, which is being used for the export of gold jewelry. So a quantitative regime has been started for the gold imports by giving 1% less duty than the normal rate of customs duties on the import side also. So I think that way the government is able to negotiate better in the new FTAs which are coming up, and which ensure that the value-led exports which India is trying to attain under the Atmanirbhar Bharat scheme. So that is sort of improved in the regime which happens. So I think this question probably is actually more focused on exports, and I think we have been able to cover that question also. So I think the time is running out, Gautam, and I think we have to wind up this session. Yeah, we have to thank the participants on behalf of both of us, and thanks to Taxmann for giving us this opportunity to be part of the session and share our thoughts about FTA. I think this is a very, very important topic, a hot topic, and I think trade and industry the message is that the trade industry needs to particularly participate in the negotiation which are going on between India and other countries as far as the FTAs are concerned. You have a fairly good idea of what new age FTAs are there, what are the other aspects of FTA, and how to actually utilize the benefits of FTA. So once again, thanks for participating, and we look forward to your further questions. Thank you.